The clock read 6:27 a.m. when the E41 school bus left the gate of the José do Carmo Municipal School. It was a normal morning in the North Zone, with a cloudy sky, streets washed by a light drizzle, and traffic waking up lazily. But inside the vehicle, among colourful backpacks and superhero notebooks, something sinister had already begun to unfold, something that would change the lives of everyone on that bus, and the entire city, forever. The bomb was planted at exactly 6:24 a.m., not through carelessness, but through surgical precision. A dark metal box with nearly invisible wires running beneath the seats, connected to a makeshift remote-triggered device. Outside, from the top of an alley in the Rocinha favela, a man in black gloves watched the bus depart, breathing heavily behind a cloth mask. His phone vibrated in his pocket with a single message: "The target is on board. Time to settle the score." And while you follow every second of this story, subscribe to Conflict Route. Because here, each episode is more than a mission. It is a dive into the heart of chaos, where justice and crime walk side by side. Lieutenant Colonel Eduardo Bastos had already faced war operations in the hills, clashes with heavily armed criminals, and even shootouts in broad daylight. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could prepare him for the call he received at 6:59 a.m. "Sir, we have a code red. School bus E41 has been hijacked. They're talking about explosives, and your son is on board." For a second, the world stopped. The sound of the police radio became a distant hum. His son Lucas's name, 9, echoed like a cruel whisper. Eduardo caught his breath and his voice hardened. "Mobilize the bomb squad. I want Alpha Unit on the perimeter in less than 10 minutes. I'll lead the operation myself." At BOPE headquarters, mobilization was frantic. Black vests, helmets, shields, weapons, and most importantly, the disarmament case. Soldiers from the bomb squad checked cables and equipment with almost surgical precision. There was no room for error. Sergeant Vita Rangel, an explosive specialist, led the technical squad. From the drone report, we have an IED device, potentially with a motion sensor and a redundancy circuit. This was not done by amateurs. Meanwhile, the control room was controlled chaos. Maps were open, drone footage was flying over the bus route, phones were ringing off the hook, and journalists were already crowding outside. The Commando Rubro criminal faction had promised retaliation after months of billions in losses from operations in the favela. And now they had the most valuable bargaining chip, the son of the man who had led these actions. Inside the bus, the driver Sebastião Batista, a 63-year-old man with 4 decades of experience, tried to remain calm. His deep, patient voice echoed between the seats. "Kids, let's play that memory game. Who remembers all the names of their classmates?" Some children smiled, distracted. Others cried softly. But Lucas, the boy with deep brown eyes and a level 2 autism diagnosis, was shaking uncontrollably in the corner. The sound of sirens in the distance and the commotion around him disoriented him. He was muttering to himself, rocking his body. Sebastião, attentive, slowly crouched down towards him. "Calm down, kid. Look, do you remember the song we sang on the field trip? Shall we sing it quietly?" Outside, press helicopters began to circle. The first live broadcasts were popping up on all television channels and social networks. The city watched in real time what promised to be the biggest police drama of the last decade. At 7:32 a.m., the bus was intercepted on an overpass on Avenida Brazil. Police surrounded the perimeter with barriers, and snipers were already taking up positions in nearby buildings. The tension was palpable. Commander Eduardo got out of an armored vehicle. His steely gaze hid the despair that boiled inside. On the radio, the cold voice of the criminal leader of the faction echoed, "Colonel Bastos, we know how much your son means to you. Either you suspend operations in the Penha complex and release our imprisoned men, or we will bury 23 children in a national prison." Silence. The TV camera captured the moment Eduardo clenched his fists. The entire country held its breath. The bomb clock ticked 1 hour, 2 minutes and 34 seconds. Specialist Rangel and his team advanced, mapping the bus with an infrared scanner. The children, still restrained, were instructed not to move. "We have a problem, Colonel. The device has 2 triggers, one remote and one by pressure under the bus's axle. If they try to evacuate or move too much, it will detonate instantly." Sebastian exchanged a look with Eduardo. Time was the enemy. In homes, bars, cell phones and offices, millions followed the drama live. Hashtags exploded on social media. Security experts, psychologists and commentators discussed the situation in real time. Meanwhile, in a dark room in the Xiu community, the leader of Commando Rubro watched the television with a cynical smile. "Now, Colonel, you will feel the weight of our losses." The sun was already rising heavily on the horizon, turning the cracked asphalt of Avenida Brazil orange. The paralyzed city watched, astonished, as more police cars and ambulances lined up around the surrounded bus. Commander Eduardo stood motionless, in uniform, with his eyes fixed on the vehicle his son was in. Sweat was running down his forehead, but his posture was steely. "Sergeant Rangel, estimated time for neutralization," he asked without looking away. "If there is no secondary trap, 40 minutes. But if there is a surprise in this circuit, we can lose everything in 10 seconds. Eduardo nodded. There was no alternative. The clock on the bomb was now ticking. Minutes and 56 seconds. In the hastily assembled negotiation room, Captain Renata Lima, a crisis management specialist, adjusted her headset. Her calm voice was a direct line to the kidnapper. "We need proof of life for the children. We need to buy time," she instructed, signaling for the drone cameras to do another flyover. On the line, the criminal finally gave in. "Open the broadcast. You want proof of life? Then show everyone the despair you have created." Minutes later, TVs across the country showed images from inside the bus. Children with wide eyes, some crying, others hugging each other. And Lucas, the commander's son, covered in sweat, with his hands over his ears and breathing heavily. At the BOPE headquarters, Eduardo closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, his gaze was even colder and more calculating. "Captain, give me the phone. I'll talk to him myself." Eduardo held the radio tightly. "This is Lieutenant Colonel Bastos. You know who I am. I know what you have lost. I know what you are trying to do. But you also know what I am capable of doing. Release the children. I give you my word that we will negotiate your demands. Messing with innocence is not your code. Do not tarnish what remains of your honor." Silence. The tension was overwhelming. On the other end of the line, the criminal was breathing heavily. Then the answer came like a blade. "Honor has already gone down the drain, Colonel. Now it's an eye for an eye. Prepare your son's coffin." The call dropped. Inside the bus, Sebastian struggled to keep the children calm. His gaze constantly crossed the panel where the countdown continued. 20 minutes and 18 seconds. He approached Lucas again. "Son, breathe with me like this. Inhale, exhale. Look at me." Lucas was still shaking, but the driver's words were beginning to pierce the blanket of panic. It was then that Sebastian noticed, with the experience of someone who has dealt with all kinds of situations, a crucial detail: one of the pump's wires was vibrating slightly. Someone was remotely tampering with the device at that very moment. At the barracks, intelligence experts intercepted a signal. The bomb's remote control was being manipulated from inside the favela. The Red Command was ready to detonate it at any moment, regardless of the negotiations. Eduardo turned to Rangel. "We have to invade their base and neutralize the remote trigger. If we take control away from them, the shuttle won't explode, even with the pressure sensor. It's either that or wait for them to press the button first." It was a suicidal operation, invading the faction's stronghold with the clock against them. "Assemble the team. I'll go ahead," said Eduardo, already locking his vest and checking his pistol. Rangel nodded. "So let's give these thugs what they asked for." At 8:12 a.m., while the entire country was still watching the siege of the bus, the BOPE Alpha Team, 12 men silently infiltrated the alleys of the favela. Equipped with silencers and balaclavas, they advanced like predators. At the faction's checkpoint, 3 armed men monitored a laptop connected to the remote detonator. One of them held the cell phone, receiving direct orders. Eduardo raised his hand in a signal to the men. On the count of 3, 3, 2, 1. Broken door, flash grenade, muffled gunshots. 4 seconds. 3 enemies neutralized. Rangel disconnected the detonator cables at the exact moment the bus's timer ticked. 9 minutes and 6 seconds. Remote control neutralized. He shouted into the radio. Back on the bus, the bomb squad advanced cautiously, but Sergeant Rangel had bad news. He looked at Eduardo, panting, his face tense. "Colonel, we can't. The bomb has a braided circuit with a real-time vibration sensor. Any attempt to cut or isolate the wire will trigger the detonator immediately. We can't neutralize it. We only have one option now: total evacuation. And fast." The digital clock blinked ominously, minutes and 42 seconds. Eduardo swallowed hard. His eyes looked at the bus full of pale, motionless children, their small hands clutching their backpacks. Priority evacuation. Let's get these kids out now. No matter the method, get everyone out. Let's go! Rangel was already shouting orders to the soldiers. "Team, go, go, go. Beta squad covers the rear. Open the emergency exit. Pick them off one by one. Don't touch anything but the benches." The driver, Sebastião, breathing heavily, stood up. "I help organize. They trust me. We go faster that way." One by one, the children began to be taken out through the back. The bus was isolated within a 300-meter radius, and ambulances were waiting to take them in. The tension was so thick it felt like the air was vibrating. The timer was ticking mercilessly. 3 minutes and 30 seconds. When there were only 3 children left, Sebastian looked at the back seat. The place where Lucas, the commander's son, had been. Empty. Eduardo's stomach turned. "Where's Lucas?" The voice came out sharp. Sebastião's eyes widened and he dove back into the bus with Eduardo behind him. They frantically searched between the seats. Then they saw Lucas had huddled under one of the benches in the last row, trying to hide from the noise and confusion. He mumbled under his breath, his eyes wide and his hands covering his ears. His jeans were caught on the twisted iron frame of the bench. Eduardo fell to his knees beside his son. "Son, Lucas, look at me. It's Daddy. We're going to get out of here, okay?" "Daddy's here." Lucas didn't react. Panic had plunged him into a state of complete dissociation. The clock showed 2 minutes and 5 seconds. Rangel shouted from the door, "Colonel, we don't have time. We need to leave now." Eduardo didn't answer. With a tug, he tried to free the trapped fabric. Nothing. He took a small pocket knife from his vest and with agile movements began to cut the hem of his pants. Eduardo, with his hand on Lucas's shoulder, tried to bring him back. "Son, breathe with me. 1, 2, that's it. 1, 2, look into my eyes." 1 minute and 12 seconds. The cut in his pants finally gave way. He pulled Lucas out. Eduardo carried him in his arms. "Go, go, go!" Everyone ran towards the back exit. Outside, the BOPE team was already shouting, "Imminent explosion! Go, run!" Eduardo crossed the police barrier with his son in his arms, his heart beating like a war drum. Sebastião was right behind him, panting, holding his vest open. Behind him, the lone bus remained parked on the road. The timer showed 30 seconds. The commander shouted, "Everyone back off! Retreat now! Impact zone!" Police and rescue teams rushed toward the secure perimeter. Eduardo didn't stop until he crossed the 300-meter line. His legs burned, his chest felt like it was tearing, but he didn't loosen his grip on Lucas for a single second. When the last child crossed the barrier, Rangel signaled with his thumb. "All outside critical radius. The clock has reset." For a second, the world was suspended. Then, a flash. The sound of the explosion shook the entire avenue. The bus was consumed by a fireball that threw debris dozens of meters into the air. The impact blew out windows hundreds of meters away. The crowd, which watched everything live on helicopter cameras, let out cries of shock. The hot wind from the shockwave passed by Eduardo and his team, even from a distance. He lowered his body over Lucas, shielding his son with his own body. When the echo of the explosion died down, only the smoking carcass of the bus remained. Silence. Just the sound of glass breaking and sirens in the distance. Sebastian fell to his knees, panting, tears streaming down his deep wrinkles. Eduardo, with Lucas still in his lap, sat down on the sidewalk. The boy was now breathing more calmly, his eyes beginning to focus again. Rangel approached. "Everyone alive, Colonel. Evacuation 100% complete." His voice cracked with emotion. Eduardo let out his breath for the first time in minutes. He hugged Lucas tightly, his hands shaking. Outside, on televisions and cell phones across the country, millions of people witnessed the scene. Relief exploded on social media. The hashtag #BusHeroes dominated the world. Days later, Colonel Eduardo Bastos would refuse interviews and decorations. In the silence of his home, sitting next to Lucas, he would watch the news that praised the most successful and dramatic operation in recent history. But he knew heroes don't come back unscathed. In his uniform pocket, he kept the torn hem of his son's pants, a reminder of how fragile life is and how much it is worth fighting for. If you like the story, leave a like. This shows that it is worth continuing to bring stories like this, which keep you hooked from beginning to end. Comment below. What would you do in Colonel Bastos's place? Would you have the courage to get on that bus? And if you are not yet part of the conflict route, sign up now, because here, with each episode, reality hits harder than fiction. Now tell me, does this mission end here?